class, to continue with our discussions with the biochemistry lecture, we have here the Cori cycle and the lactic acid cycle. This cycle in carbohydrate metabolisms consisting of the conversion of glycogen to lactic acid in the muscles, diffusion of lactic acid into the bloodstream, which carries to the liver where it converted to glycogen. Okay, and a breakdown of that glycogen to glucose, which is transported to the muscles, the bloodstreams, and reconverted into glycogen. Meaning, yung breakdown ng glycogen to glucose is glycogenolysis. Okay, and then from glycogen to glucose, that is glycogenesis. Okay, wherein parang gluconeogenesis siya. Okay. So meaning glycogenesis, okay, that is the conversion of your glucose to glycogen. So take note class, glycogen is the reserved carbohydrates that is present in the hepatocytes or the liver tissues. So the reaction of cascades or the series of sequence, meaning a cascade series of events or sequence is as follows. Epinephrine, that is known to be epinephrine is a protein that is known to be the neurotransmitters, binds to the beta receptors, okay, on the muscle cell membrane and stimulates the adenylate cyclase enzyme or the adenylyl cyclase enzyme. Okay, so this is your epinephrine. In step 1, binds with the beta receptors or receptor, then it will stimulate or activate adenylyl cyclase enzyme. Once adenylyl cyclase enzyme is activated in the membrane, it catalyzes the formation of the cyclic adenosine monophosphate from adenosine triphosphate. So, adenosine diphosphate, dephosphorylation process, magpuno ng adenosine diphosphate, then another dephosphorylation process, it will form cyclic adenosine monophosphate. So, the increase of cyclic adenosine monophosphate, it will activate the protein kinase enzyme. Okay? Usually inactive ito. So once nagkaroon ng cyclic increase in cyclic adenosine monophosphate level, it will activate the inactivated protein kinase enzyme. So it will become active already. So the binding of the cyclic adenosine monophosphate enzyme is considered to allosteric. So where there is what we call switch off and switch on. So pag bind niya, pwede magkaroon ng switch on. Pag wala na, of course, there is no binding, that is switch off already. Okay, so that is in stage number 3. Stage number 4, the protein kinase enzyme causes phosphorylation, wherein there is what we call addition of the phosphate group. So series of phosphorylases enzyme which involve in phosphorylation process or addition of phosphate, so which activates them finally to produce glucose 1-phosphate. Okay, so this glucose 1-phosphate class, okay, at the same time, in the enzymes are being activated in glycogen breakdown, okay, so it will, at the same time, enzymes are being activated for glycogen breakdown, so glycogen synthetase enzyme must be inactive, take note, so glucogenesis must be switched off, and glucogenolysis switch on. So take note class, wherein, in stage 4, dalawang event yan. Series of phosphorylation process. At the same time, i-activate yung glycogen, inactive. Kung magkaroon ng inactivation of the glycogen synthetase enzyme. So, kung inactive siya, there is a switch off of the glycogenesis. So, kung switch off ang glycogenesis, then, si glucose 6-1, so yung glycogen mo is converted to glucose 6-phosphate. That is the switch on, yung natawag natin na glycogenolysis process. So, kailangan, kasi kung ma-active si glycogen synthetase, so magkakaroon ng glycogenesis. So, there is what we call a building up or a production of glycogen. So, kung i-switch off natin siya, so magkaroon ng glycogenolysis. That is the breakdown already of glycogen to glucose 6-phosphate, then followed by glycolysis process. Okay? So, this is already in the muscle tissues. So, the blood, muscle tissues. Okay? So, step number 5, take note class. The glucose 6-phosphate is the final result of the initial stimulation of epinephrine and other hormones such as glucagon. So, during that process class, yung glycogen mo, So usually nagkaroon ng glycogenolysis. So initial product niya, intermediate product is glucose 6-phosphate. So it is due to the stimulation or the binding of epinephrine or glucagon. Okay? So then glycogenolysis pathway is the next step in sequence. If this happens to a liver cell stimulated glucagon, the glucose is produced to enter the bloodstream. Okay? So, glucose, when stimulate ng glucagon, maproduce siya ng glucose kasi coming from the glycogen, correct? That is the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. So, it enter the bloodstream already. Next, so once na nandoon na class, example, glucose 6-phosphate followed by glycolysis process, it will produce adenosine triphosphate. So, the product is a pyruvic acid to lactic acid. Then, this lactic acid class enters the liver cells. In the liver cells, lactic acid is converted to pyruvate. Then it will enter the citric acid cycle. Sa citric acid cycle, so usually pyruvate combines with acetyl coenzyme A. So yung final product is oxaloacetate. So it is almost different stages. It will produce ATP. Yung ATP is needed for gluconeogenesis process, wherein yung glucose mo, yung pyruvic acid the product, will convert it to glucose. Okay, glucose 6-phosphate, so ma-store sa liver. So there is what we call switch on of the glycogenesis process. Okay, so glycogenesis process that is facilitated by enzyme glycogen synthetase. Then, kung mag-breakdown naman due to that hormone stimulation, so pwede mag-convert into glucose. So balik na naman dito sa first, glucose to glucose 6-phosphate. Okay, so glucose 6-phosphate to glucose, then glucose 6-phosphate. This is known to be a Cori cycle. So take note, in every process, glycolysis, so there is what we call production of energy there. And then in the citric acid cycle, there is production of another ATP. And of course, in gluconeogenesis, so that in ATP is needed for gluconeogenesis, wherein glucose is converted to glucose 6-phosphate, then glucose 6-phosphate back to glycogen. So this is known to be glycogenesis process. So yung switch on niya, so yung enzymes involved there is the glycogen synthetase and enzyme. So this cycle is very important. Sample, glucagon, so production of glucose that is needed for the glycolysis process. Okay, and that glycolysis process produces energy in the form of ATP. So this is the importance, of Cori cycle that takes place in our body. Okay.